Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
I made an apple tart. I shared a story about the apples. And I remember inside my head, as I was telling the story about the apples, in my head, I was saying, shut up, that's boring. And sure enough, when I got the call to be given the show Sugar, to be allowed to host it, they said, well, you just made it so personable with your story about the apple.
Are you a teen or adult looking for more happiness in every day and ways to connect with people in your life?
You've come to the right place. Hack Your Happiness is a podcast designed to bring you the behind the scenes of what brings iconic individuals happiness, plus their life hacks.
I'm Mercedes.
And I'm Anastasia.
And we're the two teens behind Small Bits of Happiness.
We're interviewing Olympic athletes, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and more.
Throughout all of our episodes, you'll find great conversations, hacks that you can take away and try in your life, inspiration, as well as unique and surprising insights. Today, we're speaking with Anna Olson. Anna Olson may be Canada's baking sweetheart, but she's an accomplished savory chef as well. And with her positive and common sense approach in the kitchen, she's become one of the country's and international most recognizable television chefs. Appearing for 2 decades on the Marilyn Dennis Show and on Food Network Canada, on shows like Bake with Anna Olson and Great Chocolate Showdown, her audience has expanded globally through broadcast television.
Anna has an incredible YouTube channel called Oh Yum with 1.4 million subscribers, where she shares her classic content, live streams, and a fresh series called Food Travel Diaries. She is an expert at writing recipes and translating them into 10 best-selling cookbooks. Anna's newest cookbook, Baking Wisdom, was released in 2023 and became an instant bestseller.
Anastasia and I have been watching Anna for years, and as kids and as teens, she is one of our go-to bakers for all of recipes and hacks. And that's why we are so thrilled to be speaking with her today. Welcome, Anna.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Mercedes and Anastasia.
Before we get into this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, we just want to quickly say, check out our happiness wellness products designed by us for individuals of all ages to help you bring a small bit of happiness to your home with our tangible tips and tools. Check them out in the show notes. Thank you. We are so excited. As I said in the intro, we've been watching you and following your recipes for so many years, and just being here with you today is so exciting.
We are such huge fans.
Yes, definitely. And we love the recipes. They're delicious. And you are one of the first and one of the biggest Canadian Food Network superstars. So take us back to the beginning. How did your journey start?
Oh my goodness. Well, the Food Network started in 2001 and I came on in 2002, and someone told me, they called me the OG of Food Network because I have consistently been on since its second year and still on. I have a new season of Great Chocolate Showdown that will air this fall. So there's still stuff happening, which is very, very exciting. It all started... Well, baking started a long, long time ago. Like you said, you were baking as kids. I too was doing that. And when I was in high school, it was my after school activity. I was friends, or the school community was very sports minded, and I was not athletic. Team sports, anything where you have to rely on me for sports in any way, not a good idea. And so baking was my outlet, and that's how I would relax. And it took me so long to figure out to make a career of baking because it was just always there. And so I studied political science in university. I did a double major actually with sociology. I went into investment banking afterwards because I didn't know what else to do, but constantly and consistently baking was what I would always keep in that happy part of my brain to keep me grounded, make me happy. And then I made a switch. I guess I was about 25, 26, and I quit working cold turkey, went to cooking school, never looked back. And then the TV adventure started after I had written my first cookbook along with my husband. He was executive chef of a restaurant. I was pastry chef. And I think that's how my name got out there. And the Food Network at that point they knew they wanted to create a dessert program. They put a call out on the internet, but let's remind ourselves this was 2001. Nobody answered. No one applied for the job. So they contracted a headhunter to ask pastry chefs across the country to consider applying and auditioning. I made the short list, and I was so busy at the time that I don't think I had time to get nervous. It was the audition was scheduled 2 weeks before Christmas. I was too preoccupied with gingerbread houses and Christmas cookies and all that I didn't have time to get nervous. And I think that saved me because when I went in, I didn't overthink it. I just I made an apple tart. I shared a story about the apples. And I remember inside my head, as I was telling the story about the apples, in my head, I was saying, shut up, that's boring. And sure enough, when I got the call to be given the show Sugar, to be allowed to host it, they said, well, you just made it so personable with your story about the apples. And I thought, who would have guessed that was actually what I thought was the worst moment turned out to be the best moment.
Incredible. That's so funny how sometimes we just don't see our own value or what other people will appreciate the most. And also, right? It's so funny. But I love what you said about not being able to really relate to the people in high school because as 2 teens, we're also not the most athletic kids. And so I get it. And it can be hard because everyone's doing sports. And if you're not into the sports, it can be hard to kind of know your place and your interest. But there's so many interests out there. So it's important to keep that in mind. I most of all love how you ended up going with what makes you happy, and that is baking, and making an incredible career from it. So inspiring.
Exactly. And again, with like the trial and error, you tried all these different things, and I think it was good that you did all these different mediums, and then all of a sudden you realized that baking was what you truly needed to do, and you were able to follow that.
Exactly.
And your journey is so amazing. So what do you think has been your most significant challenge, and how did you overcome it?
That is a very big question. I think the biggest challenge was overcoming my own perceptions or misperceptions of what a career path should be. And I don't know what I attribute it to, but I guess you tend to learn a more conservative, you go to high school and then you go to university, and then whatever you study in university, therefore you apply to your career and you go on this straight line adventure. Well, life is never a straight line. And the most fun is actually when you get off the path a little bit, but it can be terrifying at the same time. So taking calculated risks, not flippant, I'm being careless risks, but those deliberate decisions that sometimes put you out of your comfort zone, I have discovered are the ones that are the most fulfilling, because even if you don't succeed, you were in control of the situation. I chose to do that, and maybe it didn't work out well. You try a job, you try a career path, maybe it doesn't go the way you wanted to, but you learned a lot about yourself. And even through working through the restaurant and bakery business, I learned a lot about the type of leader I want to be by working not just with great employers or bosses, but also bad ones, so that, I do not want to be like that person. And you take that way. Sure, it was not the best experience, but there's always a takeaway at the end of the day.
For sure. I think it's so important to realize every negative situation that you're in, there's always something that will come out of it. And using other people as lessons for what you want or you don't want to be is also such a great way to elevate yourself without making those mistakes.
And it's just such a refreshing perspective to have. And I really think that, there's such a conventional mindset and a way to do things. And for some people that structure is really reassuring, and knowing what the next step is great. But also it's important to not be afraid to sit down and think through, maybe what if I took this? What are the pros and cons of trying something new and different out? And maybe I think seeking support in friends and family, asking them for their advice if they've ever tried something like that. Because I think often as teens, we might feel alone in taking calculated risks, maybe quitting a sports team and starting a business, or quitting a sports team to focus on a certain course that we're very passionate about. But, seeking support from others and not just having to always take all these risks on our own is so important. But many teenagers experience failure on a daily basis. And this can be, maybe you don't do so well on a test or a quiz, or you don't score as many points as you hoped you would have in a sports game. Can you share with us a personal experience of failure from your culinary journey and how you overcame it?
I wouldn't even know where to begin. I have had so many failures in what I now do. In creating recipes, sharing recipes, to get to the point where I have a recipe that is ready to share with you, I have to go through layers and levels of failure. And you see, I have my apron on today because today is actually yesterday and today were kitchen days for me. So I've been in the kitchen, and I'm working on a new project. And this is, well, it's hard to tell on camera, but it's a fail.
It looks delicious still.
It's got chocolate, so it's got that going for it. It's not a total disaster. And we did eat a significant amount of it.
Yeah, it looks good.
I don't even know what it's supposed to be. I've just called it my hot mess cake.
Sometimes you just need a hot mess cake.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be gooey and rich and have caramel and pecans and chocolate, but I overthought it, and I put in cinnamon, and I put in oats, and I put in raisins. They don't belong in this cake. And then the caramel syrup, I don't know if you can see, kind of congealed. It is not appetizing. It is flat looking and greasy looking. So my point is, even now, people might say, oh, Anna Olson, she's a successful baker. I can't be a success unless I make these mistakes, because this is where the learning happens. If I make something and it comes out okay, even if it's not remarkable, well, what do I learn from it? Okay, yes, I need to take it to the next level. But the real learning comes when something is an absolute failure. And then I think, okay, why did that caramel congeal? We don't want to use that word when we're describing any recipe, congealed. Why was the cake almost tastes underbaked? So clearly I have too much moisture. Should I be using baking soda instead of baking powder? So then I start asking myself the questions, but what has to happen first is the acceptance of that failure and use it as a tool instead of a crutch. A crutch holds you up, but use it as a vehicle to strive. If it's something that's worth pursuing, and it does happen. Sometimes when I was working with a gluten-free chocolate chip cookie recipe, I was struggling with a recipe that I just could not get it together. I kept making cookies that were flat as pancakes, and when I picked them up, they would fall apart. And so there hit a point after a few tries, it's like, okay, this is not working. Stop, rethink, start again. And sometimes you have to do that and switch directions.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I think there's so much to learn. Well, first of all, I just need to say I love the idea of the hot mess cake. I mean,
think that's
it
such
looks
a good-
delicious. Maybe
And I love that name.
Yeah,
I love
maybe
that name
a few
so much.
modifications here and there, like on the caramel, but it looks amazing.
Well, then I'll stick with the title. We've got a good title. And if we like the combination of the chocolate, the pecans, and the caramel, we're going to stick with that. But yeah, back to the drawing board, and I'll start again for you.
Exactly.
I think we know that what treat we're gonna make once it comes out. We'll make sure to try to get a notification for it once it comes out, and as soon as we get that email, we're making that hot mess cake.
Yeah, but I love how you pick out the bits and pieces that you like. Maybe the caramel doesn't work too well, but the chocolate and the pecans is a good mix, or anything like that. Picking out what you've learned from a success, and picking out what you've learned from it not being too much of a success, and putting that towards the next iteration, because that's what life is all about. It's about constantly growing and iterating and constantly making adjustments. And so I love how, that perspective of people thinking Anna Olson, a talented baker, she's been on Food Network, she's got countless cookbooks published, everything that she makes must be perfect all the time. But seeing that, everyone messes up and everyone makes mistakes. It's okay to have a mistake. It doesn't make you any less smart. It doesn't make you any less good at your sport or your passion or your field of interest. It just gives you a tool to learn. And so I really love this perspective.
And I feel like sometimes teens can be a bit scared to make mistakes, especially if, let's say, 1 year they do really, really well in soccer, and, they're all in the highest levels, and they're competing really well and winning every game, and then they're scared to go again next year because
what if they don't do as well?
Exactly. And so I think just having that mindset saying I can leave every game, if I lose, it might actually be better for me because I can pull out a lesson from that and become an even better soccer player from it, which helps you then not give up when you're scared of
I think
failing.
that applies to really any part of life.
For sure.
Yeah, and we personalize it so often. And when you think of, especially something like that in the competition world, well, 50% of the people on the field walk away having lost, 50% win. So, you start doing the math, you're not going to walk away always with the win. And you have to, part of growing is being able to process that and find the support and resources when you're struggling with it. I know one of my insecurities, especially when I was younger, about cooking, I loved cooking and baking so much, but I didn't want to share it with people for two reasons. I think this is, when I was in high school, this was the 80s, and it felt too domestic. And I was embarrassed to say, when you're young and you're trying to fill out your resume when you're applying for a job, and you say, what are your hobbies? And I couldn't put down figure skating or skiing or soccer. And I didn't want to put down cooking. And I happened to sew too, because I thought, oh my gosh, I sound like a little homemaker here when I want to be this strong, powerful woman who goes out to do things. And so I would hide the fact that I love doing it, where turns out it took a while to figure it out, but I think I made a thing of it.
Yeah, I think so
you definitely
too.
become that strong, powerful woman.
Exactly. But how did you overcome that? How did you take the fear of seeming domestic to others and then just kind of breaking through it and sharing it with the world?
It was almost a bit of a push and pull, because my grandmother was my influencer in terms of that understanding that love of baking and sharing recipes, and she used cooking and baking as a way to express the love of her for her family. On the flip side, when I was seriously entertaining becoming a chef and I was sharing that with my family, they struggled with it, because here I was in a well-established banking career. I had a clear trajectory that, should I want to keep up in the business, I could get promotions and move up in the business. And they're like, why would you give that up? And why would you take on student debt to all of a sudden go in a completely different direction? And what are the risks? And it's not a field that pays off. But when they realized, it took a while, but when they realized how committed I was, they came around. So it was seeing the passion and inspiration from one relative, but also struggling with the resistance from another part of my family, that I had to kind of just essentially block both out and decide, okay, what's right for me, and make that decision.
That decision of just doing what's right for you is so important, especially as we get older, and more so the decisions we make start to influence and impact our own lives. And that can be so tough, to do things simply and purely for your own satisfaction and fulfillment rather than for other people validating you. But the reality is, you're never going to be able to please everyone, right? You have to just do what makes you feel happy. And that's an important lesson.
The one you have to please is the person you're looking at in the mirror, and that's you. And it's funny, I have what we call our corporate philosophy, to make it sound official and fancy, but it's essentially a bit of a life philosophy. I've got two of them. The main one is, when an opportunity presents itself, you say, why not? There are reasons why not. One is it's ethically or morally compromised. You may hurt yourself or someone else. It's unsafe, risky. But what the two reasons you can't use as an excuse why not that I have is, I'm busy or I'm tired. Because guess what? We're going to be busy and tired all the time. And you don't want to miss something that could be potentially life-changing or exciting simply because, oh, well, I'm tired today, or I have a lot to do. If you can fit it in, if it's, I'm so tired that I may hurt myself if I do this, well, then yes. But ultimately, if it piques your curiosity, I just reach for that. Well, why not?
Absolutely. I love that so much. And that's such a good way to ground yourself and self-reflect.
Yeah, because sometimes we just get really worried that, oh, well, I'm just so tired and I just don't want to spend an extra hour of doing extra something when I could be, watching a show or having some relaxation time. But just truly exploring different things, and even failing sometimes, because you need to fail to learn.
Absolutely.
But I feel like oftentimes it's not just those things that can be holding us back. It's also the fear of failure. So what are your top 3 tips for teens who are afraid of this type of failure, especially when they're trying to follow their passions?
That's a very good question. So to overcome that sense, that fear of failure, because I too used to, talk myself down when I was cooking a recipe and it didn't come out right. I think scale and proportion. Put the failure into proportion. Is it life devastating? Likely 99.9% of the time, it is not that consequential. And then once you accept the reality, and I think part 2 to that is accept that most people aren't paying attention to your failure. I think sometimes we're so self-aware that we think everyone is watching us with that same level of attention, which I've realized even hosting a TV program that people have chosen to watch me, they're not taking in every single word I say. So if I mess up when I say a line, just keep going, because I'm human, and please accept me if I'm human. And if you don't, we'll change the channel or turn me off of YouTube, because then I don't need you as an audience. So just letting go of the fact that people are not paying as close attention as we think they are. And then I think once you've accepted that, then it's easy to look at, okay, what is my takeaway from this? What do I have control over that I can change? What is beyond my control and that I have to learn how to accept that and work around it? And then hopefully that gives you the strength and confidence to try again or pursue, make that decision. Do I stay on this track or do I pursue something else?
Exactly. I always love the idea of asking myself, if I mess up or if I make a mistake or fail, I ask myself, will this matter to me? Will I even remember this 5 years from now? Because if I don't, 5 years, when you're a teen, 5 years might seem like not a large amount of time, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a ton of time at all. So really, I think about, if I'm not going to be worried about this when I am in my 20s, why would I be worried about it now? Because that's just a waste of time. So just kind of going into a situation saying, hey, if I win and I succeed at whatever this task is, awesome. And if I don't, then that just helps me get closer to that awesome success, and it'll make it taste even sweeter than it will already.
And I often like thinking about it almost like a story where, when you fail, it's often just another chapter in the book where you need to fail to get to that final chapter where you're succeeding and you're able to actually be achieving all those amazing dreams.
Very good point. It's a boring book.
Exactly.
You made it. It was delicious. The end. That's not a journey. Also, your success, once you reach the success after a few failures, is so much sweeter because you've worked for it and you've earned it, and it's yours, and you can take ownership of that success.
Exactly. And it just feels so much better when you know that it wasn't just handed to you. It didn't come super easily. You put in the time and effort, and you deserve every single bit of success that you got in whatever dream or test or assignment or sport or baking good that you're
whatever
creating.
it is.
Exactly. So as a chef, there's oftentimes, everybody has different palates, different preferences, and there might be many people who don't like certain foods or certain recipes just because of their personal preferences. Have you ever faced this type of criticism in your career, and how did you handle it?
That's a good question too. And I would say yes, regularly. And when I started out in the TV world, there was no social media. And so I didn't have to contend with that immediate and direct critique, which in its own cases, when a critique would come, it would almost hit harder because there wasn't that constant barrage of little comments. But those little negative comments just eat away at you. And so I try and ignore them because really there's nothing I can do about them. And I don't engage with, I don't need that negativity in my life. I'm already my own self-critic here with hot mess cake. I don't need that. But at the same time, actually, and it was my first director on the set of Sugar, my very first day, who said, okay, now that you're going to be on the Food Network, things will change. And he said, don't let the critics over occupy your thoughts, and also take compliments with the same sort of, let them roll off your back. Because if you let all the positive compliments feed your ego, well, then you're inflating your own sense of self-worth, and you got to find that balance. So you take the good, you take the bad, but you don't dwell on either. But we just, as humans, we love to focus on the negative first. I try and disengage. If something is repeated or seems to be a quality issue, then I do take it seriously, because critique is valuable from the outside. That's why we rely on teachers to guide us through our education system. If we could do it so easily ourselves, we would. We need that leadership, and you do need correction and critique from an outside source, but taking it in proportion and scale to the rest of your life, I think, is important.
Totally. I think there's a difference between feedback and criticism, and sometimes people are just giving you criticism based on their own insecurities or their own unhappiness, whereas sometimes people are giving you feedback based on a genuine opinion, and maybe that's something
and their
to
past
take into
experiences.
consideration. And it's important to not weigh those both equally, because if we never take feedback, we'll never grow. But if we always just pay attention to all the criticism, then we're going to feel very down upon ourselves and unmotivated, because people have so many different reasons to spread hate, unfortunately, that it's important to keep that in mind and kind of brush it off.
Exactly. And I heard the saying that was like, don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from. Because if you wouldn't usually listen to what they have to offer about guiding you, why would you listen to them when they're telling you, oh, you should change this and change that, that doesn't taste that good, you should do something differently. Focus on the people that you would follow because you trust their advice, and you also trust that what they're telling you is going to help you grow and become a better person or better at whatever you're trying to do.
Both of you, very well said. And if I on that note, finding mentors, I think, is so important, because you need to have, in order to take advice, you need to trust someone. They have to earn your trust. And so that's where mentorship really comes in. And so they can be the ones to critique, and then you constructively are able to grow because of it. But yeah, you have to find, and a mentor doesn't have to be someone that's necessarily older or your boss. You can find mentorship in positive friendships. You can find it in sibling relationships. Look at the two of you. You can find it everywhere. But just know that a mentor is always looking out for your best self, and you respect what it is they have. It could be a moral compass, it could be career skills, but you have pursued that relationship because you respect what they have to give back, and it goes both ways.
Of course, and being able to take this kind of feedback and understanding that what the mentor is telling you is to help you, not to like shut you down, I think is so important. And I think it's called having a growth mindset, and it's so important for even us teens to cultivate, so that we're able to walk in saying, oh, I understand that all of this is to help me. It's not to shut me down. And what would you recommend for teens, and what are your best tips for creating and trying to have more of a growth mindset?
You've almost expressed it yourselves in how you've said you have to be open-minded and make yourself available. That's the hardest part. When you're feeling vulnerable, it is hard to open up yourself so someone can see that. But it takes that for someone to accept you, who you are. When you put up the walls or the shells, people can't see past that. And so, yeah, it takes a lot of courage. And I've learned that over the years. It takes great courage to ask for help. And so I think that is probably, I'm talking myself to this answer, because that's a big question you've asked, Anastasia. And I almost don't want to over answer too quickly because it does take some deliberation and thought. But I'd say, yes, not hiding yourself is the way. How can you have growth without being true to yourself and being true when you share who you are with others?
Absolutely, and embracing your mistakes and embracing the fact that you are a human and it's okay to make those mistakes, because we might have these perfectionist tendencies. We may want to achieve and achieve and achieve and see ourselves and just constantly grow, but remembering that, our mistakes help us grow, and it's important to learn from everything. That's, I think, truly what a growth mindset is all about.
Exactly.
And I love how you said that it takes courage to grow, because it's so difficult to see yourself and then see where you need to change, and it's so difficult, like, kind of to be a self-critic without being mean to yourself, because it's a big deal to say, hey, I think I've identified something within myself that I need to shift. Maybe it's a bad habit. Maybe it's something that I keep telling myself that I should not be telling myself. But noticing that is scary, and then noticing that I need to change this without being mean to yourself and being like, I'm a terrible person for doing this or for thinking this. It's okay. And just keep on growing.
And I think that oftentimes we kind of get caught up in this, I can do this all by myself. But in reality, when you think of growth, I oftentimes think of plants. And a plant can't grow without being watered. And watering, especially when a plant is just growing, or like you planted it in your backyard, it needs some extra water from like your watering can, and you need to water it just so that it's able to build a solid foundation, and so then it's able to get the nutrients from the ground.
Exactly.
And then it can do that itself. But it's so important to accept that help and be able to use that help, so then you can, in the end, be an individual.
But for you, I have a quick question, because you have such a, big baking empire. You've been on TV and all of this, but have you always had a growth mindset where you've been able to learn from your own mistakes and grow, or have you struggled with that as well?
Oh, I've tripped and fallen plenty of times. And, and everyone has moments where they're not sure what to do with their career. I remember after my first few years in television, the producers, the executives saying, well, when you've had 3 seasons, you should feel really good about what you've accomplished. So I was like, okay, I get the hint. Maybe that's it. That's all there is. That's when I said, okay, now what do I do? And I opened a bakery business, and that carried on for a few years, but so did television. And then I realized at that moment, oh gosh, okay, there hit a point where I realized I was actually saying yes to too much and compromising health and lifestyle. I wasn't sleeping enough. I had to be up at the bakery at 5 a.m, and then I was doing events through the night. And I remember driving home one time I live in Niagara, between Toronto and Niagara, and it's about a 90-minute drive. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall asleep while I'm driving. And it's one of those, okay, my safety is at stake here. I'm doing too much. And not everything goes. I had a 3-year gap between my first and second season of my Bake with Anna Olson series. And that time was just riddled with insecurity. And you just think, well, I thought I made a good TV show. Why aren't we renewing? And there's so many factors beyond our little scope of vision. And that's, I think, the hardest to escape. When you're struggling with something, all you see is what's right in front of you, and you think you somehow have total control over it. There were far bigger things at stake in that 3-year period that had nothing to do with me. And big Food Network budgets and production companies changing, and leaders, they were having their own headaches and sleepless nights over it. And here I am thinking, oh, it's just me. It's little old me. And so, keeping the hubris in check is important now and again.
That's the thing, isn't it? We tend to really internalize and personalize everything, when a lot of the times it has nothing to do with us. We think, oh, my friend is kind of not super engaging today. They must be super upset with me even though nothing happened. And it's because maybe your friend is struggling. Maybe they didn't sleep last night, or maybe they didn't do too good on a test, or something else is going on. Or we think, just like with the Food Network, we think, oh my gosh, my teacher is, not helping out, or she's not answering my emails, but there's a whole other thing going on, and it's not about us, it's about the other person, and they're not really thinking about us at all. So it's important to kind of keep ourselves in check and say, hey, did something happen that I did that could have resulted in the other person, or in this case, reacting or turning out the way it has?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of like a twist in the direction, but what is your favorite go-to easy recipe that you love to make and you also enjoy eating?
That's a tough question too, because I'm always working on something new. So usually whatever I just made is my favorite, except for hot mess cake over here. Not my best friend today. I'd say one of my go-tos is actually called my go-to banana bread. You can't beat a good banana bread. And I always end up buying too many bananas than I think I'm going to eat. And then they sit going ripe on the counter. And so that's one of those recipes that I've made banana bread for years, and I would always tweak and change a little something here, something there. And then I realized after a point, I hadn't changed the recipe in a while. I was just perfectly happy with it. So that recipe you can find in my book, Baking Day. And it truly is, when I say it's my go-to banana bread recipe. And there's something about banana bread. Bananas do not come from Canada, as we well know, but banana bread is a very Canadian recipe. Like, they don't make banana bread in France and Germany, and they do in the US, of course, but there's something very Canadian about banana bread. And when you have it in the oven, it's just, the smell of it baking is so calming. And so it's also, if I'm working on a very complicated recipe, you hear that, hot mess, and I'm getting frustrated, I can put a banana bread together and put it in the oven, and it makes me feel better. It's like, I can do it. I can do that. My other fix when I'm feeling a little out of control or overwhelmed, now this is in the scope of my to-dos around the house, I do a load of laundry, because I know what to do. And I put the laundry in, and it washes, and I dry it, and I fold it, and it helps me get control back, because I know what to do. There are no surprises when I do the laundry. And then at the end of it, I kind of feel rested, grounded, and then I've got clean laundry at the end.
I love that. And I've never thought about banana bread being just specific to Canada or the US, but that's so true if you think about it. And I love that little bit of like authenticity that it has to North America, and so comforting. And also I love the fact that kind of the laundry and the banana bread are kind of on the same scale in terms of baking and just normal life. It's that comfort, exactly. It's
know exactly what's gonna come with it, especially once you've done banana bread over and over again. Same with laundry. And I know that definitely also for us, we just kind of associate banana bread with just feeling happy and comfort. And we also, I get that with the bananas, like we always buy so many bananas, and then afterwards some of them start getting a bit old, so you just kind of leave them and get some more new ones, and then you have all these bananas that are like still there and they're getting a bit old, and you're like, I know what I have to do. Make banana bread.
It's time. Exactly. It's a sign.
Exactly.
So baking brings us both, and I'm sure you as well, a small bit of happiness. And we absolutely loved your hack for adding some cornstarch to chocolate chip cookies for added softness. We've been doing that for years, and it's just such a great little modification. Super simple and super beneficial. But do you have another baking hack that you could share with us and our audience?
Yes, I have quite a few. I think if you do a fair bit of baking, have you ever accidentally overwhipped egg whites?
Probably at some point.
We've had a lot of
most
baking.
People have. So if you overwhip egg whites, meaning they look dry and kind of craggy, you don't want to use them, because if you fold them into your cake batter and bake them, they're stretched to their maximum volume that they'll actually collapse and it'll sink your cake. And so that's why you don't want to use them. But you're saying, okay, well, great. What do? You don't throw them out and start again. I always say you go make a cup of tea. Set the egg whites aside. And because they've been over whipped, and the time it takes you to have a cup of tea, they'll collapse on themselves. You'll see a puddle of liquid at the bottom. And even if you've already added the sugar, then you can re-whip them on medium speed, not high speed. It will break them down and then bring them back up to the point you missed the first time around. So you don't have to start again. And then another great one is if you add a tablespoon of instant skim milk powder to whipping cream when you want to whip it up. If you've ever whipped cream to serve, say, with strawberries or frost a cake, it will weep and start falling apart within a matter of hours. Yes, so you add your skim milk powder, which is milk protein, and that stabilizes your whipped cream, and it'll hold its volume so you can frost a cake and look like a hero.
Amazing.
Awesome.
I mean, we are definitely going to have to put these to the test because
sure.
we love to make like pavlova with whipped cream. But the problem is that the egg whites, you do need to beat them. And I think that's so great that you don't have to restart. You don't need to use more of your eggs already. You can just have a little break, maybe go read some of your favorite book or take a little, drink
coffee
tea,
break,
coffee break, snack break, eat some other treat that you've got around, and then you come back and everything has sorted itself out.
For sure. I know.
Well, and Mercedes, on that note, you said you make pavlova. The difference between a meringue that's crispy all the way through and a pavlova, which is crispy on the outside but soft in the center, is the addition of the cornstarch. It's the pavlova that was my inspiration to put cornstarch into my chocolate chip cookies to keep the center soft.
Oh
That's
my gosh,
amazing.
that is so cool.
You were already on that path.
That's so cool. Our grandma is a huge baker, and so I remember every time during Christmas she'll come over and we'll make like a big caramel crunch cake with like pavlova, whipped cream, and like hazelnuts, and then another pavlova underneath. It is our favorite dessert.
So we'll definitely be sharing these hacks with her. I'm sure she'll be listening because she's a huge fan of yours. And so, yes, we're very excited. I'm sure our listeners are as well.
Most definitely. So what do you think is the biggest piece of advice that you would give to your teenage self?
Oh my good. Beyond just relax. I think we've talked a lot about it over this last 45 minutes. But yeah, definitely don't sweat the small stuff. Keep it in proportion. And you can't know, but time stretches it out. When you've only been on the planet for 16 or 17 years, every moment feels so critical. But the more moments you keep adding on to that as you age, stretches out and equalizes the importance. So the good moments stay important and valuable. But guess what? The bad moments, actually, you accrue enough of them. And also, I'd say one of my other takeaways is just remind ourselves that opportunities don't always wait for convenience. So just because you're ready to start a new project or go find a job, it doesn't just happen. You have to kind of move with the times and don't get frustrated when things don't go your way in the first 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
And if you want something, go pursue it. But yeah, it's not going to sit and come to you if you're just sitting there waiting. No one knows until you express what your wishes are.
Exactly. And that's why you've got to have that balance between trusting the timing of your life, but also taking initiative. And if you really want something, you kind of have to put in the work to get it there. Like, you might be, a teenager, but if you really, really, really want to get that job, maybe you need to go and meet with some people. Maybe you need to do some research online. Sitting around is not going to help you get there.
Exactly.
So you got to put in the work and just know that.
And be on the lookout for opportunities and constantly think, is this something that can help me get to my end goal? And if it is, I need to try it, even if I'm a little bit unsure about it.
So what do you like to do every day that brings you a small bit of happiness?
Well, I talked about having a cup of tea. I love just that. I have my 2 meaningful cups of tea. So first thing in the morning, when I make that first cup of tea and it's steeping, it's just that quiet moment before I start my day. And I absolutely love it. It is delicious. And then I do the same thing kind of after lunch to get into the afternoon. It's like, okay, you've made it through the morning. You're getting through the day. So my big treat is a really good, and I'm not fancy tea, just a good black tea, but with like half a teaspoon of sugar and milk. It has to be just right. And then I'm happy.
Love it. That's such a great way to kind of motivate yourself to keep going throughout the day, because it can get tough sometimes.
For sure.
And so just having like a little, and also like something to look forward to, that positive anticipation. If I keep going for an hour, then I get to have my tea after. And it's just like a nice little motivator. Exactly. And also there's so much science behind it. Like, I've been doing a lot of research on the vagus nerve, and drinking something warm stimulates the nerve in your mouth. Exactly. Yeah, it does. And that calms calms you down. So actually, I love to have like a chamomile tea whenever I'm feeling stressed because of the vagus nerve, and obviously chamomile is also calming.
Yeah, for me, I'm not a big morning person. I talk about this a lot. I'm very open with it. I do not like mornings. But what really makes it better for me is also I have a matcha every morning because I get really tired, and what really helps me is just having a little bit of that. It tastes really good, and it's one of my favorite things about the day.
Exactly.
So do you have one motivational quote that you love and remember? And if you do, why?
Well, I think I would go back to the two that we talked about and just having loose conversations. So, and the two actually relate. So the first would be opportunity does not wait for convenience. And then part two is when that opportunity arises and you're unsure, ask yourself, why not?
I love that. Those
That's
are so good. And I love how they
amazing.
kind of connect with one another. It's such a beautiful like way to look at life and way to look at different opportunities and evaluate them, because it's all about just taking what we have and making the most of it and kind of just navigating. And yeah, I love that.
Exactly.
So
when life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
exactly. But in terms of the upcoming future, do you have anything exciting coming up that you would like to share with us and our audience? Events, cookbooks, any news or goals, etc.?
Well, interestingly, you have to work so far ahead when you write a cookbook. It takes over 2 years. So I already have a manuscript submitted. I'm waiting for the edits. That's for my next cookbook, but it won't be out until fall 2025. Hot Mess Cake over here is for the cookbook to follow that. But in the meantime, I just launched. I love learning. I'm still learning new skills. I was just learning how to navigate MailChimp so that I could launch my very first newsletter. I've never done a newsletter before. And so it was interesting. I've worked with Canva and others similar. So just that newsletter took me hours and hours and hours to write. I did not realize, but it was good. I like to keep myself challenged. So if you want to sign up for my newsletter, I have it coming out just once a month with recipes, tips, and then a first peek at when I have events and opportunities, because I do travel a lot and do cooking demos. So that's the best way to get the first peek at that, is to sign up for the newsletter. In terms of going places, I do a lot of travel, and I host culinary tours. So our next big trip, I'll be leaving at the end of May to go to Puglia, the heel of the boot of Italy.
Oh my gosh,
which is very exciting. Yeah, lots of fun. So we do trips 2 or 3 times a year. So I don't have any more. Oh, the one culinary tour I do have spaces on is a holiday market Christmas cruise. So this is one of those river cruises. It starts in Germany and goes and ends in Vienna. It's the second week of December, and we go to Christmas markets. And then when we're sailing, I host cooking demos. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm such a Christmas nerd. I love it.
Same
I love
here.
Christmas, best time of
That
year.
sounds like an incredible experience to visit Christmas markets around the world. I mean, wow.
I think all the way from Germany Christmas markets to Vienna Christmas markets.
Amazing.
I mean,
I can't even imagine.
crazy.
But I think that MailChimp is definitely a big challenge. There's a lot of glitches on there. So we have a newsletter too, so we definitely can relate. But we'll definitely be signing up because I really want to know all the recipes and all the new updates. So.
And since summer's coming up, you never know what amazing recipes you might try out.
We have a lot of free time coming up in the next couple of months, so we will be giving them a go. But where can our audience sign up for the newsletter, and where can they find you if they want to keep up and learn more?
Well, the newsletter, you can sign up through my website, which is annaolson.ca. And for social media, my handle is at Chef Anna Olson on Instagram. I even pop up on TikTok now and again. Then my channel is Oh Yum on YouTube. And I have a combination of live stream and pre-tape content.
Amazing. Well, those will all be linked in the show notes. So super easy access for anyone who's listening. But we just want to say thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you
us today.
so much.
We've learned
It's been
so much,
amazing.
and this has been so inspiring.
It's been a pleasure to speak with you both. Congratulations on what you're doing. I think it is fantastic.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, and thank you so much to Anna for joining us today.
She is such an inspiration and just so full of life and energy and knowledge, and it was incredible speaking with her today. Anastasia, what was your biggest takeaway?
I think my biggest takeaway is to always have a growth mindset. Growth mindsets are so important, and it's a really great way to also be able to take in information from mentors and people that genuinely want to help you and see you succeed, because it's so hard to grow and become a big tree of knowledge and one day help others when you won't accept some rain or watering from a watering can or from the clouds, and that way you can't grow and become the best version of you. What about you, Mercedes?
I really love that, and I love the metaphor that you used. But my biggest takeaway from Anna Olson today would have to be scale and proportion. If you're going into a situation and you're worried that you might fail and you're hesitant about pursuing anything really because you're concerned about a potential failure, ask yourself, what's really the worst thing that happens if I fail? What's the worst thing that happens if I don't succeed this time? Most likely, you'll have another opportunity, and even if it's not an identical replica opportunity, you'll have another opportunity of this same sort, and you'll learn something, you'll grow, and then the success will taste even sweeter. So really just looking at the grand scheme of things, approaching any potential situation.
And it's totally okay to be a hot mess, because in the end, they will always turn out tasting great.
Exactly. Just like the hot mess cake.
Exactly.
I'm sure that it will taste great in the end.
I can't wait to try a hot mess cake. I feel like that'll be so delicious.
We'll be waiting when it comes out in like 2026.
Exactly. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please leave us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening. It really helps us out, and we really appreciate it.
Also, be sure to join our happiness family. We really appreciate it. It really helps us out, and most of all, we'd love to have you. You can join us by following Hack Your Happiness on whichever podcast listening platform you're on now. It's completely free. See you next time!